When a man cheats, the first thing he often does is deny the reality of his actions. Denial becomes an instinctive reaction, almost like a shield raised in a moment of panic. The human psyche, when faced with the fear of exposure, humiliation, or loss, naturally seeks to protect itself, and for many this manifests as a refusal to acknowledge the truth. The words that escape his lips might be abrupt and defensive, like "that never happened," or "you're imagining things." These statements, though simple, carry a weight that attempts to shift the conversation away from what actually occurred. It's not just a rejection of the accusation, it's a calculated effort to dismantle the foundation of trust that the accuser relies on. Denial in this context is rarely passive. It's often aggressive, a forceful attempt to create doubt in the mind of the other person. A cheater knows that their partner has likely approached them with evidence or a strong intuition, yet they rely on the idea that if they can reject the claim with enough conviction, they might still maintain control of the narrative. The denial is not just about protecting themselves from immediate consequences, it's about buying time. Time to think of an excuse, time to manipulate the situation, or time to assess how much their partner knows. In these moments, denial is less about the words spoken and more about the psychological impact it has. When someone hears you're wrong, well, that's not true, they're forced to confront a conflict between what they believe and what they are being told. This conflict is deeply unsettling because relationships are built on trust, and trust relies on shared understanding and honesty. When denial enters the equation, it shakes the very foundation of that trust. The partner begins to wonder, am I mistaken? Could I have misunderstood? Did I jump to conclusions? These questions, even when fleeting, give the cheater a significant advantage. The denial often comes with a tone of incredulity. A cheater might express shock or anger at being accused, saying things like, "How could you even think that of me?" or "I can't believe you don't trust me." This tactic serves a dual purpose. It deflects attention away from their actions and places the burden of proof on their partner. It's a clever move because it preys on the partner's emotional attachment and their fear of being wrong. The cheater knows that in many cases their partner doesn't want to believe they have been betrayed. They exploit this reluctance by framing their denial in a way that appeals to the partner's hope that the relationship is still intact. In some situations, denial escalates into an attack. A man might accuse his partner of being paranoid, jealous, or insecure. Statements like "you're just looking for problems" or "you always think the worst of me" are not just dismissive, they're accusatory. They flip the script, making the partner feel as though they are at fault for even questioning the cheater's loyalty. This tactic is particularly effective because it introduces doubt about the partner's own behavior. They might start questioning whether they are overreacting or being unreasonable. This psychological manipulation is not accidental. Denial is a tool honed through practice and instinct, used to maintain control over a situation that is slipping away. The cheater knows that if they can sow even a small seed of doubt, they have a chance to regain their footing. It's a gamble, but one that often pays off, especially in relationships where trust has been a cornerstone. The irony is that this very trust, which the cheater has betrayed, becomes the weapon they use to defend themselves. What makes denial so effective is its simplicity. It doesn't require elaborate explanations or detailed lies. It's a straightforward rejection of reality, delivered with enough confidence to make the listener pause. In the absence of concrete proof, denial can be incredibly persuasive. Even when there is evidence, the cheater might attempt to downplay its significance, saying things like "that's not what it looks like" or "you're misinterpreting the situation." These statements don't necessarily refute the evidence, they merely cast doubt on its interpretation. In these moments, the partner is left to grapple with conflicting emotions. On one hand, they may feel hurt, angry, and betrayed. On the other, they may cling to the hope that the denial is genuine. This inner turmoil is precisely what the cheater relies on. They know that as long as their partner is uncertain, they have a chance to steer the conversation away from their actions and toward their partner's perceived overreaction. Denial also taps into the human desire for harmony and resolution. When faced with a difficult truth, many people prefer to accept a plausible lie rather than confront the painful reality. A cheater understands this and uses it to their advantage. By denying their actions, they create an opportunity for their partner to retreat from the confrontation, allowing the issue to remain unresolved. Even if the partner doesn't fully believe the denial, they might choose to accept it temporarily, either to avoid further conflict or because they need more time to process their feelings. The power of denial lies in its ability to destabilize the partner's sense of reality. It forces them to question their observations, instincts, and even their worth. For the cheater, this is a calculated risk. They know that outright denial might not always work, but it often buys them enough time to come up with a more convincing story or to gauge how much their partner knows. This is why denial is almost always the first response. It's a reflexive attempt to regain control in a situation where control has been lost. When a man cheats, one of the most common responses he resorts to is shifting the blame. This tactic serves as a strategic deflection, redirecting the attention and accountability away from himself and onto his partner. Instead of addressing his actions directly, he chooses to focus on perceived shortcomings in the relationship or flaws in his partner's behavior, using these as a justification for his betrayal. This approach is not only manipulative but also deeply damaging to the person on the receiving end, as it creates a narrative where the victim of the betrayal feels responsible for the very pain they are enduring. Blame shifting often begins subtly, with statements that seem more like observations than accusations. He might say, "I just felt like we weren't connecting anymore," or "You've been so distant lately." These remarks, while seemingly benign, carry a heavy implication that the partner's behavior somehow created the conditions for his infidelity. By framing his betrayal as a reaction rather than a choice, he attempts to paint himself as a victim of circumstance, someone who was driven to cheat rather than someone who acted out of selfishness or a lack of integrity. As this tactic unfolds, the subtlety often gives way to more explicit accusations. He might say, "You're always so busy, I didn't feel like I mattered to you anymore," or "You've changed, you're not the same person I fell in love with." These statements are designed to evoke guilt and self-doubt in the partner. They imply that the partner failed in their role, whether as a spouse, girlfriend, or life companion, and that this failure somehow excused or explained the betrayal. It's a cunning maneuver because it shifts the emotional weight of the situation. Instead of focusing on his wrongdoing, the partner begins to question their own actions, wondering if they could have done something differently to prevent the affair. In some cases, blame shifting takes an even darker turn, with the cheater accusing their partner of being the root cause of their infidelity. He might say things like, "If you hadn't been so controlling, I wouldn't have felt the need to look elsewhere." Or, "You were so critical all the time, I just needed to feel appreciated by someone." These accusations are not only unfair, but also deeply hurtful. They turn the betrayal into a perceived reaction to mistreatment, making the cheater appear as though they were pushed into their actions rather than taking responsibility for their choices. What makes blame shifting particularly insidious is its psychological impact. It forces the partner to carry an emotional burden that is not theirs to bear. They may start to internalize the accusations, believing that their actions or perceived shortcomings truly led to the betrayal. This internal conflict can be paralyzing, as it combines the pain of infidelity with the guilt of self-blame. The partner might begin to replay moments in their relationship, searching for signs that they were neglectful, unkind, or otherwise responsible for creating the conditions that allowed the affair to happen. This tactic also serves another purpose for the cheater. It shifts the power dynamic in the conversation. By accusing the partner of being at fault, the cheater positions themselves as the one who was wronged, flipping the script in a way that diminishes their accountability. Instead of being on the defensive, they go on the offensive, turning the conversation into an examination of the partner's behavior rather than their own. This shift not only deflects blame, but also puts the partner in a position where they feel compelled to defend themselves, further diverting attention from the original issue. Blame shifting can also create a sense of obligation in the partner to fix the relationship. By framing the infidelity as a response to unmet needs or unresolved issues, the cheater subtly suggests that the partner holds the key to preventing it from happening again. This implication places an unfair burden on the partner to address the supposed problems, even if those problems were exaggerated or fabricated as part of the blame-shifting strategy. The cheater, in turn, avoids taking responsibility for their actions, instead casting themselves as someone who simply needs more understanding, care, or support. In many cases, this tactic is accompanied by an air of self-pity. The cheater might say things like, "I was feeling so unloved," or "I've been so unhappy for so long." These statements, while seemingly vulnerable, are calculated to evoke sympathy rather than accountability. They portray the cheater as someone who acted out of desperation rather than deceit, further muddying the waters of responsibility. The partner, already reeling from the betrayal, may find themselves torn between anger and compassion, unsure whether to hold the cheater accountable or to comfort them in their supposed pain. Blame shifting also taps into a deeper cultural narrative that often places the burden of relationship success on women. In this context, a man's infidelity is sometimes framed not as a breach of trust, but as a symptom of a failing relationship, one that the woman is expected to repair. This narrative, though flawed and outdated, can still influence how partners perceive and respond to betrayal. A woman might feel pressure to be better or to work harder to meet her partner's needs, even when those expectations are unreasonable or unattainable. The cumulative effect of blame shifting is a profound erosion of self-worth in the partner. By constantly pointing out perceived flaws or shortcomings, the cheater undermines their confidence and sense of self. This emotional manipulation creates a cycle where the partner feels increasingly inadequate, making it harder for them to stand up for themselves or to see the situation clearly. They may become so focused on addressing the accusations that they lose sight of the fact that the betrayal was not their fault, nor was it a justifiable response to any issues in the relationship. Blame shifting is not just a defense mechanism, it's a form of emotional manipulation that serves to protect the cheater at the expense of the partner's emotional well-being. It's a tactic that preys on vulnerability and trust, using these qualities to deflect accountability and to maintain a semblance of control over a situation that should rightfully expose their wrongdoing. When confronted about infidelity, one of the first things a man often does is deny the reality of his actions. Denial is a powerful tool of deflection designed to disarm his partner and cast doubt on the validity of her suspicions. In this phase, the man may attempt to outright reject the allegations, claiming that the accusations are baseless or rooted in paranoia. His goal is to maintain control of the narrative, preserve his own sense of innocence and avoid immediate accountability for his betrayal. Denial manifests in various forms, often starting with simple declarative statements like, "That's not true," or "I don't know what you're talking about." These phrases are deliberately vague, leaving little room for deeper probing. By refusing to engage with specifics, the man creates a defensive wall that makes it harder for his partner to break through with facts or evidence. This tactic forces the partner into a position of proving their claims, which shifts the focus away from his actions and onto her need to validate her concerns. In some instances, denial escalates to the point of ridicule. The man may respond to accusations with laughter or mock disbelief, saying things like, "You're being ridiculous," or "I can't believe you think that about me." This approach is particularly manipulative because it seeks to undermine the partner's confidence in her own perceptions. By dismissing her suspicions as absurd, the man subtly implies that she is overreacting, misinterpreting, or even imagining the situation. This creates an emotional imbalance where the partner begins to question her own instincts, making her less likely to pursue the matter further. Denial often pairs itself with selective truth-telling, a tactic where the man acknowledges certain details while denying others. For example, he might admit to meeting someone but insist that nothing inappropriate happened, saying, "Yes, I had dinner with her, but it was strictly professional." This partial admission is intended to pacify the partner by offering just enough truth to seem credible while withholding the full extent of the betrayal. This tactic not only preserves the man's narrative, but also creates a false sense of closure, leading the partner to believe that the matter has been fully addressed when, in fact, it has not. Another layer of denial involves projecting the issue back onto the partner. The man might accuse her of being overly jealous or controlling, saying things like, "You're always looking for something to be upset about," or "You don't trust me, no matter what I do." These statements serve to shift the spotlight away from his actions and onto the partner's perceived insecurities. This tactic not only deflects accountability, but also puts the partner on the defensive, forcing her to justify her feelings rather than addressing the root cause of her suspicions. Denial can also take on a more aggressive tone, with the man becoming defensive or even confrontational. He might say, "Why are you interrogating me?" or "You're trying to start a fight for no reason." This approach is designed to intimidate the partner into dropping the subject, using anger or frustration as a shield against further questioning. By creating an atmosphere of tension, the man discourages open dialogue, making it harder for the partner to voice her concerns without fear of escalating the conflict. In some cases, denial involves an appeal to the partner's emotions or sense of loyalty. The man might say, "After everything we've been through, how can you think I'd do something like that, or you know me better than that?" These statements are calculated to evoke guilt and self-doubt in the partner, making her feel as though questioning his fidelity is an act of betrayal in itself. This emotional manipulation exploits the partner's love and trust, turning her own feelings into a barrier against uncovering the truth. Denial is particularly effective because it leverages the inherent uncertainty that often surrounds suspicions of infidelity. In many cases, the partner may not have concrete evidence, but rather a collection of subtle clues, changes in behavior, discrepancies in stories, or a general sense that something is off. By denying these suspicions outright, the man forces the partner to confront the possibility that she might be wrong. This uncertainty can be paralyzing, leading her to second-guess herself and potentially abandon her pursuit of the truth altogether. Furthermore, denial taps into the psychological phenomenon of cognitive dissonance. When faced with conflicting information such as a partner's denial versus her own suspicions, the human mind often seeks to resolve the tension by favoring the explanation that aligns with existing beliefs. In this case, the partner may choose to believe the denial because it aligns with her desire to trust her partner and preserve the relationship. This inclination to give the benefit of the doubt creates a fertile ground for denial to take root and flourish. Denial also exploits the partner's fear of confrontation and the potential consequences of uncovering the truth. Admitting to oneself that infidelity has occurred is a painful and destabilizing realization, one that threatens the very foundation of the relationship. By denying the allegations, the man offers the partner an escape from this harsh reality, allowing her to cling to the possibility that things are as they seem. This dynamic creates a cycle of avoidance, where the partner may hesitate to push further for fear of what she might find. Even when confronted with evidence, denial can persist in more creative forms. The man might challenge the validity of the evidence, saying, "That's not what it looks like," or "Someone must have misinterpreted what they saw." Alternatively, he might question the motives of those who provided the evidence, saying, "They're just trying to cause trouble for us." These strategies are designed to cast doubt on the reliability of the information, creating enough ambiguity to maintain plausible deniability. Ultimately, denial is not just a refusal to admit wrongdoing. It is a calculated strategy designed to protect the cheater's self-image and preserve the status quo of the relationship. It preys on the partner's emotions, insecurities, and desire for stability, using these vulnerabilities as a shield against accountability. Through denial, the man creates a web of confusion and doubt that obscures the truth and allows him to evade the consequences of his actions. When faced with accusations of infidelity, many men resort to shifting the blame onto their partner as a way to deflect responsibility. This tactic is both manipulative and calculated, designed to turn the tables and put the partner on the defensive. Instead of addressing his actions, the man redirects the focus to her behavior, emotions, or supposed shortcomings, thereby avoiding accountability for his betrayal. The blame-shifting approach often begins subtly but can quickly escalate into outright accusations, creating a dynamic where the partner feels as though she is the one being judged or questioned. Blame-shifting frequently takes the form of emotional invalidation. The man might say things like, "You're always accusing me of something," or "You never trust me." These statements are intended to undermine the partner's confidence in her feelings and observations. By framing her concerns as unreasonable or habitual, the man subtly positions himself as the victim of unwarranted scrutiny. This not only deflects attention away from his own actions, but also creates a sense of guilt in the partner, making her less likely to push the issue further. In some cases, blame shifting becomes more direct, with the man accusing the partner of causing the situation through her behavior. He might say, "You've been so distant lately, what did you expect? Or if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't feel this way." These statements are particularly damaging because they place the responsibility for the infidelity squarely on the partner's shoulders. By implying that her actions or lack thereof drove him to cheat, the man not only absolves himself of guilt but also creates an atmosphere of self-doubt and inadequacy for the partner. Blame shifting often taps into existing insecurities or vulnerabilities within the relationship. For example, the man might highlight previous arguments or unresolved issues as justification for his actions. He might say, "We've been fighting so much lately, I didn't know where we stood," or "You were the one who said you needed space." By framing his betrayal as a reaction to the state of the relationship, the man attempts to present his actions as understandable, if not entirely justified. This approach blurs the line between cause and effect, leaving the partner questioning whether she bears some responsibility for what happened. Another common blame-shifting tactic involves questioning the partner's behavior or intentions. The man might say, "You've been acting suspicious too," or "Why are you so concerned about what I'm doing?" These statements serve to redirect attention away from his infidelity and onto the partner's perceived actions or motivations. By creating a false equivalence between their behaviors, the man seeks to dilute the gravity of his own actions and create a sense of mutual wrongdoing. This not only deflects accountability but also sows seeds of doubt and confusion in the partner, making it harder for her to maintain focus on the original issue. Blame shifting can also take on a more insidious form, where the man uses the partner's emotions against her. He might accuse her of overreacting, saying things like, "You're just looking for a reason to be upset," or "You're blowing this out of proportion." These statements are designed to minimize the partner's feelings and make her question the validity of her concerns. By framing her emotional response as excessive or irrational, the man undermines her ability to address the issue effectively, leaving her feeling isolated and unsupported. In some cases, blame shifting extends to questioning the partner's intentions or loyalty. The man might say, "If you really love me, you'd believe me," or "You're trying to ruin what we have." These statements are particularly manipulative because they exploit the partner's love and commitment to the relationship. By framing her pursuit of the truth as an attack on their bond, the man creates a false dichotomy where she must choose between trusting him and preserving the relationship or continuing to question him and risking its collapse. Blame shifting often escalates to outright gaslighting, where the man denies reality and manipulates the partner's perception of events. He might say, "You're imagining things or that never happened." These statements are designed to distort the partner's understanding of the situation, making her question her own memory or judgment. Over time, this erosion of trust in her own perceptions can leave the partner feeling disoriented and powerless, further entrenching the man's ability to avoid accountability. Another layer of blame shifting involves invoking external factors as explanations for his behavior. The man might blame stress, work pressures, or personal struggles, saying things like, "I've been under so much pressure lately," or "I wasn't thinking straight." While these factors may be genuine, they are often used as excuses to deflect responsibility and shift the narrative away from the deliberate choices he made. This approach not only minimizes the seriousness of the betrayal, but also positions the man as a victim of circumstance, garnering sympathy instead of scrutiny. In some instances, blame shifting takes on a more aggressive tone, with the man accusing the partner of trying to control or manipulate him. He might say, "You're always trying to catch me doing something wrong," or "You're obsessed with finding flaws in me." These statements are designed to put the partner on the defensive, forcing her to justify her actions instead of focusing on his. This dynamic creates a power imbalance where the partner feels as though she must prove her innocence or good intentions, further diverting attention away from the man's betrayal. Blame shifting is particularly effective because it taps into the partner's natural inclination to preserve the relationship. By framing her concerns as attacks or criticisms, the man exploits her desire to avoid conflict and maintain harmony. This dynamic creates a cycle of self-censorship, where the partner hesitates to express her feelings or pursue the truth for fear of damaging the relationship further. Over time, this pattern reinforces the man's ability to deflect accountability and maintain control of the narrative. Through blame shifting, the man creates a web of doubt, guilt, and confusion that obscures the truth and undermines the partner's ability to address the betrayal. By turning the focus away from his actions and onto her perceived faults or motivations, he avoids facing the consequences of his behavior and preserves his position of power within the relationship. When confronted about infidelity, a common response from a man is to emphasize his love for his partner while simultaneously denying the seriousness of his betrayal. This tactic is a form of emotional manipulation designed to create confusion and foster a sense of security despite clear evidence of dishonesty. By professing his love in the same breath as he downplays his actions, the man seeks to shift focus away from the breach of trust and onto the perceived strength of their bond. This dual approach can be disorienting, leaving the partner caught between her emotions and the facts at hand. One of the most effective ways this strategy manifests is through declarations of undying love. The man might say, "I love you more than anything," or "You're the only one I care about." These statements are intended to reinforce the idea that the relationship is still intact, despite the betrayal. By appealing to the partner's emotional investment, the man attempts to mitigate the impact of his actions, creating a narrative in which his love somehow excuses or outweighs his behavior. This tactic often works because it taps into the partner's hope that the relationship can recover, even in the face of evidence to the contrary. In many cases, these declarations are accompanied by attempts to downplay the infidelity itself. The man might say it didn't mean anything or it was just a mistake. By minimizing the emotional weight or significance of his actions, he seeks to make them appear less damaging to the relationship. This minimization serves a dual purpose. It reduces the sense of betrayal the partner feels and shifts the conversation away from accountability. The man effectively positions his infidelity as a lapse in judgment rather than a deliberate choice, which can make it harder for the partner to process her feelings or demand answers. Another layer of this tactic involves reframing the infidelity as an isolated incident rather than a pattern of behavior. The man might emphasize, "It only happened once," or "I swear it will never happen again." These assurances are designed to create a sense of finality and control, suggesting that the issue is resolved and does not require further examination. This approach preys on the partner's desire for stability and closure, making it easier for her to accept the situation without fully addressing its implications. By framing the infidelity as an anomaly, the man avoids deeper scrutiny of his motives or character. This strategy often includes an element of flattery or reassurance, aimed at rebuilding the partner's confidence and deflecting her attention. The man might say, "You're the most important person in my life," or "No one else could ever compare to you." These statements serve to reinforce the partner's sense of value within the relationship, even as the betrayal undermines it. By shifting the focus to her perceived importance, the man creates a distraction from the actions that have caused her pain. This approach can be particularly effective because it aligns with the partner's desire to feel cherished and irreplaceable. In some instances, the man may invoke shared history or future plans as evidence of his commitment. He might say, "Think about everything we've been through together," or "I see us growing old together." These statements are designed to evoke a sense of loyalty and long-term investment, making it harder for the partner to reconcile the betrayal with the image of their relationship. By emphasizing the positive aspects of their connection, the man creates a narrative in which the infidelity is framed as a minor setback rather than a fundamental breach of trust. This reframing allows him to maintain control of the narrative while avoiding the full consequences of his actions. Another dimension of this tactic involves emotional vulnerability. The man might say, "I was scared of losing you," or "I didn't know how to handle my feelings." These statements are intended to elicit sympathy and understanding, shifting the focus away from the betrayal and onto his emotional state. By portraying himself as flawed but sincere, the man creates an environment in which his actions are viewed as mistakes rather than betrayals. This approach taps into the partner's empathy and willingness to forgive, making it easier for him to avoid full accountability. In many cases, these declarations are accompanied by promises of change or self-improvement. The man might say, "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right," or "I'll never hurt you like this again." These promises are designed to create a sense of hope and possibility, making it harder for the partner to walk away. By emphasizing his willingness to change, the man positions himself as someone who is actively working to repair the relationship, even if his actions do not align with his words. This dynamic creates a cycle of hope and disappointment, where the partner feels compelled to give him another chance despite her doubts. This tactic can also include deflecting attention onto external factors as a way to explain the behavior. The man might say, "I was going through a rough time," or "I didn't know how to cope." These explanations serve to contextualize the infidelity within a broader narrative of personal struggle, making it appear less intentional or harmful. By framing his actions as a response to external pressures, the man seeks to shift the blame away from himself and onto circumstances beyond his control. This approach minimizes the betrayal while positioning him as a victim of circumstance, rather than an agent of his own decisions. At its core, this strategy relies on the partner's willingness to see the relationship as salvageable. By emphasizing his love and commitment, the man creates a compelling narrative in which the bond between them is strong enough to overcome any obstacle. This narrative can be difficult to resist because it aligns with the partner's own hopes and desires for the relationship. However, it also creates an environment in which the man's actions are not fully addressed, leaving unresolved issues that may resurface in the future. When a man is caught cheating, one of the most common and immediate reactions is to shift blame away from himself by highlighting the perceived shortcomings or behaviors of his partner. This tactic serves multiple purposes. It deflects accountability, introduces doubt, and manipulates emotions. By redirecting the focus of the conversation onto the partner, the man avoids addressing the root of his actions while simultaneously eroding the partner's confidence and self-worth. This shift in focus is often subtle at first, but can quickly escalate into a narrative that places the partner in a defensive position, making it difficult for her to hold him accountable. A frequent approach in this scenario is for the man to imply that his actions were a reaction to unmet emotional or physical needs. He might say, "You've been so distant lately," or "I didn't feel appreciated." These statements are crafted to suggest that his infidelity was not a deliberate choice, but rather a consequence of the partner's behavior. By framing his actions as a response to perceived neglect or dissatisfaction, the man effectively positions himself as a victim of circumstance rather than as someone who made a conscious decision to betray the relationship. This narrative can be particularly powerful because it taps into the partner's desire to understand and fix perceived problems in the relationship. In some cases, the man may escalate this tactic by pointing out specific instances where he felt ignored, dismissed, or undervalued. He might bring up moments when the partner was preoccupied with work, family, or personal challenges, framing these as evidence of her lack of investment in the relationship. This approach not only shifts blame but also introduces a sense of guilt, making the partner feel partially responsible for his actions. The man's narrative suggests that had the partner been more attentive, loving, or available, he would not have sought connection elsewhere. This manipulation can create an emotional imbalance, where the partner feels compelled to take on the burden of repairing the relationship despite being the one who was wronged. Another layer of this blame-shifting tactic involves exaggerating or fabricating issues within the relationship to justify the infidelity. The man might claim, "We've been fighting so much lately," or "I didn't think you cared anymore." These statements serve to create a sense of inevitability around his actions, as if the relationship was already so strained that his betrayal was simply a symptom of deeper problems. This narrative not only absolves him of responsibility, but also pressures the partner to focus on fixing these supposed issues, diverting attention away from his choices. By framing the relationship as inherently flawed, the man creates an environment in which his actions are viewed as a reaction rather than a transgression. This blame shifting often extends to questioning the partner's role in the relationship, subtly undermining her sense of self-worth. The man might say, "You've changed," or "You're not the same person I fell in love with." These statements are designed to plant seeds of doubt, making the partner question whether she has unknowingly contributed to the breakdown of the relationship. By suggesting that her personal growth, challenges, or changes have made her less desirable or compatible, the man shifts the narrative from his betrayal to her perceived shortcomings. This manipulation is particularly insidious because it preys on the partner's vulnerability and desire for validation, making her more likely to internalize blame. In some instances, the man may take this tactic a step further by comparing the partner unfavorably to the person with whom he cheated. He might make statements like, "She listened to me when I needed someone," or "She made me feel understood." These comparisons are not only hurtful, but also serve to reinforce the narrative that his actions were a result of unmet needs rather than a betrayal of trust. By painting the other person in a positive light, the man creates a distorted version of reality in which his infidelity appears justified. This dynamic can be deeply damaging to the partner's self-esteem, as it introduces a sense of competition and inadequacy that is both unfair and untrue. In addition to blaming the partner directly, the man may also invoke external circumstances as contributing factors. He might say, "I was under so much stress," or "I didn't know how to handle everything that was going on." These statements are designed to evoke sympathy and understanding, redirecting the focus away from his actions and onto the challenges he faced. While these explanations may hold some truth, they are often used as a means of avoiding accountability. By framing his infidelity as a coping mechanism rather than a deliberate choice, the man shifts the narrative away from his betrayal and toward his own struggles, leaving the partner to grapple with conflicting emotions of anger and empathy. Another tactic often employed is to emphasize the partner's own flaws or mistakes as a way to create a sense of equivalence. The man might say, "You've hurt me too," or "You're not perfect either." These statements are intended to level the playing field, making his infidelity seem less egregious in comparison to the partner's perceived shortcomings. This approach not only minimizes the betrayal, but also introduces a sense of mutual responsibility that is both unbalanced and unfair. By shifting the focus onto the partner's actions, the man avoids addressing the fundamental breach of trust that his infidelity represents. This blame-shifting strategy is further reinforced by the man's ability to manipulate the emotional dynamics of the conversation. He may alternate between defensiveness and vulnerability, using emotional appeals to create confusion and guilt. For example, he might express frustration by saying, "You don't understand how hard this has been for me," while simultaneously pleading for forgiveness with statements like, "I don't want to lose you." This back and forth dynamic keeps the partner off balance, making it difficult for her to maintain clarity or hold him accountable. By shifting between anger and remorse, the man creates a narrative in which he appears both wronged and repentant, complicating the partner's ability to process her own emotions. Ultimately, this blame-shifting tactic is a form of emotional manipulation designed to protect the man from the full consequences of his actions. By redirecting focus onto the partner, external circumstances, or the dynamics of the relationship, he avoids taking responsibility for the choices that led to the betrayal. This approach not only undermines the partner's confidence, but also creates an environment in which the betrayal is minimized or rationalized, leaving unresolved issues that can have long-term implications for the relationship. When confronted about cheating, a man often resorts to emotional tactics designed to manipulate his partner's feelings and perceptions. One of the most common strategies is to immediately express remorse in a way that appears sincere yet calculated, serving to diffuse anger and deflect blame. He might say things like, "I didn't mean to hurt you," or "I'm so sorry, I don't know what came over me." These statements are crafted to evoke empathy, shifting the focus from his actions to his regret. This form of emotional manipulation can confuse the partner, as the emphasis is subtly moved from the betrayal itself to his feelings of guilt and shame, making it harder to hold him fully accountable. The apology, while seemingly heartfelt, often lacks substance. It becomes a tool to manage the immediate fallout rather than a genuine expression of accountability or an intention to repair the relationship. By flooding the conversation with emotional appeals, the man creates an environment where his partner may feel pressured to prioritize his feelings over her own pain. This tactic works because it exploits the partner's emotional investment in the relationship and her desire to believe in his capacity for change. Instead of addressing the deeper issues at play, the focus shifts to soothing his distress, leaving the partner's hurt and confusion unresolved. In many cases, this manipulation extends to declarations of love and devotion, designed to reaffirm the partner's importance despite the betrayal. He might say, "You're the only one I've ever loved," or "I can't imagine my life without you." These statements, while appealing on the surface, are often used as a diversionary tactic to redirect the conversation away from his actions and toward the perceived strength of the relationship. By emphasizing his attachment and the value he places on the partnership, he seeks to create a narrative in which the infidelity is framed as a momentary lapse rather than a reflection of deeper issues. This dynamic can be deeply confusing for the partner, as it juxtaposes his words of love with the reality of his betrayal. Another emotional tactic often employed is to highlight his own vulnerabilities and challenges as a way to garner sympathy. He might say, "I've been feeling so lost," or "I didn't know how to handle what I was going through." These statements are designed to frame the infidelity as a symptom of his struggles rather than a deliberate choice. By portraying himself as someone who is hurting or overwhelmed, he seeks to elicit compassion and understanding from his partner. This approach not only deflects blame but also places the partner in a caregiving role, shifting her focus from addressing the betrayal to supporting him through his difficulties. The man's emotional manipulation often extends to making promises of change that are vague or unrealistic. He might say, "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right," or "I'll never hurt you again." While these promises may sound reassuring, they are often made in the heat of the moment, with little consideration for the concrete actions required to rebuild trust. This tactic serves to pacify the partner's anger and disappointment, through creating the illusion of progress without addressing the underlying issues. By offering empty assurances, he temporarily diffuses tension while avoiding meaningful accountability. In some instances, the man may use displays of emotional vulnerability, such as crying or expressing self-loathing, to elicit forgiveness. He might say, "I hate myself for what I've done," or "I don't deserve you." These statements, while appearing self-critical, are often a means of redirecting the partner's focus from her pain to his emotional state. By portraying himself as someone who is deeply remorseful and struggling with his actions, he shifts the dynamic of the conversation, making it harder for the partner to maintain her boundaries or demand accountability. This tactic can be particularly effective because it exploits the partner's empathy and desire to believe in his potential for change. Another layer of emotional manipulation involves framing the infidelity as a wake-up call or a turning point for the relationship. He might say, "This made me realize how much I love you," or "I know now what I could have lost." These statements are designed to reframe the betrayal as a catalyst for growth rather than as a breach of trust. By positioning the infidelity as a mistake that ultimately strengthens the relationship, he creates a narrative in which the partner is encouraged to view the situation as an opportunity for renewal rather than as a reason for concern. This approach not only minimizes the gravity of his actions, but also places the responsibility for moving forward on the partner, as she is expected to embrace this new perspective. In some cases, the man may attempt to manipulate the partner's emotions by emphasizing the potential consequences of ending the relationship. He might say, "I can't live without you," or "If you leave me, I don't know what I'll do." These statements are designed to evoke fear and guilt, making the partner feel responsible for his well-being. By introducing the possibility of emotional or psychological harm, he seeks to create a sense of obligation that overrides her anger or disappointment. This tactic can be particularly manipulative because it preys on the partner's sense of compassion and her desire to avoid causing harm, even at the expense of her own needs. The man may also attempt to downplay the severity of his actions by framing the infidelity as a mistake rather than a deliberate choice. He might say, "It didn't mean anything," or "It was a one-time thing." These statements are intended to minimize the impact of his betrayal, making it seem less significant or damaging. By portraying the infidelity as an isolated incident, he seeks to reduce its emotional weight and make it easier for the partner to overlook. This tactic not only trivializes the betrayal, but also undermines the partner's feelings, as it suggests that her pain is disproportionate to the situation. Throughout these interactions, the man often employs a combination of emotional appeals, promises, and deflections to create a narrative that minimizes his accountability while maximizing the partner's willingness to forgive. These tactics are designed to manipulate her emotions, making it difficult for her to process the betrayal or establish clear boundaries. By exploiting her empathy, love, and desire for resolution, he seeks to maintain control over the situation and avoid facing the full consequences of his actions. The result is a complex emotional dynamic in which the partner is left grappling with conflicting feelings of anger, compassion, and uncertainty, making it challenging to assert her needs or prioritize her well-being.